going on, guys? Texas Platinum is back. This time around, it's just Myers and myself. We got kind of a fun video for you. It is still the off season, and this was a nice idea that Myers came up with that we wanted to explore, where we're going to be talking about our top 5 Texas games that we've ever attended. So before we hop into it, though, please like, subscribe, as always. We're hoping for that 3K was our original goal for the September 11th game versus Arkansas, but we kind of safely reduced it to 2K, hoping that we hit that goal and not fail. But if we can get to 3K, hey, that'd be great. So help us out. And if you like this content, let us know. Again, with the off season, trying to kind of keep it fresh with some interesting videos. But yeah, so we're just going to rank our top 5 games again that you have to attend it. That's the requisite for this list. Myers has attended a lot of games, especially over the years. Myself, I haven't really attended until I was kind of around a student up till this point. So unfortunately, none of us have that, '05 Rose Bowl game or any of those like super classics with Vince. I don't believe. Yeah, so you should be hearing probably a little bit more recent games, but nonetheless great games. So let's hop into it. Myers, how about you lead us off with your number 5?
All right, I'll go first. So my number 5 game I've ever attended was Texas versus USC in 2018 when we played them in DKR. This game was really good atmosphere. It's always fun when two blue bloods meet up, especially in a home and home setting, not at a neutral site. And the USC fans that we interacted with were super cool. But what stood out to me the most this game was that Caden Stearns, whenever he blocked that kick and returned it, that was my first big game in the student section. And I think that was the loudest I've ever heard DKR in a single moment that I can recall. I mean, 2009, the Jordan Shipley return punt against Texas Tech was super loud too. West Virginia 2012 was super loud as well. But I think that moment, that Caden Stearns block kick, was the loudest moment I've ever heard DKR ever. And that kind of cemented this game in the top 5. It wasn't really a big year for us. I mean, 2018, we did win the Sugar Bowl that year, so there was something there. But it was just a really euphoric game we started off that season so bad in 2018, and then we had that big win, and it kind of got things rolling. And you could just kind of feel the momentum turning as that game was progressing on the entire season. So, 2018 USC was definitely number 5 for me.
Nice. That is also on my list. A little bit higher, actually, and I'll give my reasonings why. But for me, number 5 was actually one of the only. It was my second Texas game I've ever been to, and it was before I was a student. Texas OU in 2013. So this was my first Red River game. I kind of got it as my birthday always falls around Texas OU, which is nice because I love that game, and couple that with my birthday, and it makes it just a great week, especially if it results in a Texas win. So, and at that point, I wasn't really a solidified Texas fan because I hadn't gotten into the University of Texas at that point. I did apply to Oklahoma as well. So going to that game, I sat with Texas fans. I was dressed in Texas gear, but I kind of watched it a bit as a neutral fan and was like, depending on how this goes, maybe this will influence what I think of the schools, being impartial at the time. Which was funny because going into that game, like I said, it was Mac Brown's last year and their season started off pretty shaky. But they were able to rebound and almost could have won the Big 12 title that year. And this game was a big part of it. Despite being definitely an underdog in that game, Texas came out and really dominated OU. Case McCoy, who obviously didn't have a super prolific career at Texas, probably had his best game ever as a college player in that game. There were a lot of big moments as well, kind of turnover type things. I remember Chris Whaley getting a pick 6 and stuffing it into the end zone. I remember Deshae Johnson doing a big punt return. Just a lot of big plays in that game, a lot of memorable moments. And of course, I think every Texas fan can speak to, their first Red River game is going to be a memorable one, even if it results in the loss, because that's just such a going to the game at the fair, I mean, the Cotton Bowl itself is kind of it almost feels like a holy ground. Like you're, you're going back to like it's like you're going back in time whenever you enter into those gates. So that coupled, with it being my first time and with it resulting in a Texas win, and just the surprise of Texas fans that I was with that were just so shocked that we were doing so well in that game and held Oklahoma down, who was I think in the top 10 at that time, if I'm correct. It just made for a memorable game. And at that point, I kind of knew like, hey, I really do like Texas way more than Oklahoma. And fortunately, I was able to get into Texas and become a Texas fan, and all that good stuff. So it was just kind of a not a crossroads moment, but it was kind of a defining thing in my fandom, at least as a Texas fan. Because at that point, I started following the team a lot closer and watched the games leading up to that Baylor game where they sadly lost and didn't get the Big 12 title, and Mac's career ended at that. And then became a student. So yeah, number 5, definitely up there on the list.
Yeah, I was at that game too. That was a great game. But cool. So number 4 for me, I have Texas beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in 2018. We did that trip in like one day. We drove up that morning and watched the game and drove right back. But it was just like I remember going into that game, we were just talking about how can we just not get blown out? Like, can we just make this a competitive game where we look decent in there? Because we kind of, let's be honest, we kind of backed into a New Year's Six bowl game that year for sure. And I remember going on like the Georgia and A&M message boards before the game. They're all talking about blowout. Let's show them how the SEC does things. And then sure enough, Texas and Tom Herman go in there and pretty much blow out Georgia till the end. Classic Turtle Tom making it interesting at the end. But we just like dominated them physically, just in every facet of the game. And the SEC chant in the what's it called, the Superdome? I don't remember the Superdome. Mm-hmm. The SEC chants were a lot of fun, and Georgia fans leaving like in the third quarter was also a good sight to see. So it's always fun to dunk on the SEC, and that's when Sam said we're back, which lives in infamy. But hey, it was still a great game, and we got that Sugar Bowl win. You can't take that away from us. So yeah, I'll put that game at number 4 for me.
I mean, at the time, the "we're back" thing was awesome, though. Like, think of it in the moment, how great that was.
Like, yeah, we thought we were back.
Yeah, it seemed like a changing of the tide, but yeah, great game. I wasn't there, but I watched it, and it would be in my top 5 if I was, I'm sure. For me, number 4, this is actually our one loss on the list between Myers and I, and it's Texas LSU. I felt like I couldn't not put it in just because the game was just so big going to it, especially, I mean, I wasn't a student, but I was in that, young alumni seating type thing. So I was essentially grouped in with the students, and just the hype around the game was intense. I mean, it was after that Sugar Bowl game. So, everyone, it was a top 10 matchup for the first time in DKR in forever. College Game Day was there. LSU was really good. We didn't even realize how good LSU would become after that game, and become one of the most dominant teams in college football history for that season. Joe Burrow just being an absolute stud. None of that was known, but we did know that this was going to be a big game and a big matchup, and it was important that Texas on such a big national stage show that they can handle it. And super close game, very good battle. Definitely kind of, two prolific offenses that were just going back and forth. I mean, it wasn't like a fast strike type thing on Texas's end. I mean, it was for LSU, but on Texas, it was definitely a very methodical pulling apart of LSU's defense and big plays. I discussed it with Myers earlier, but I mean, if Texas was able to squeak out the win, it'd probably be number 1 or number 2 on our lists, just because of how exciting that game was, coupled with the atmosphere and dealing with getting into the student section and the stampede, I think is what we called it. Just a lot of memorable moments. Unfortunately, we couldn't come up with the win, but I couldn't not put it on the list. The implications felt so big in terms of it probably would be number one in terms of if the criteria was like biggest game like setting that I have been to outside of our recent Big 12 championship. Because even though it was at the beginning of the year, and Myers, maybe you could speak to it for a second, but the stakes just felt so high. And again, it had nothing to do with getting to it wasn't a Big 12 game, so it didn't matter about getting to a conference title if we were able to do that. But I don't know. Just the atmosphere was so electric and tense, and it was like that the whole game, all the way up until the last second. It seemed like, so yeah, I think it deserves to be on the list, even though we didn't get the W.
Yeah, that game was electric. It's a shame we didn't finish it off, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the students nearly died entering that stadium. It was definitely a safety hazard or something. Get in there, like everybody just rushed the gates. We were sitting out there for like hours before the gates opened, so probably like 6 hours before kickoff, we were at the stadium just waiting to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember after the game, I was literally sick, like ill, because we went to game day at like 5 a.m, college game day, and it was just a super long day, and then screaming in the sun all day. It was rough, but it was also legendary. But we lost, and that kind of killed the vibe. So yeah, that game was definitely an experience for sure. For me at number 3, I have Texas OU in 2018. That was also, that was probably Sam Ehlinger's best game as a Longhorn. I mean, he went toe to toe with Kyler Murray, pretty much outdueled Kyler Murray, and Texas. That's kind of when we were like, okay, this thing's changing under Tom Herman, and just a huge win. Whenever you beat Oklahoma, we haven't done it often recently. It's always a huge deal. And we were pouring it on for a while, and then of course Tom Herman takes his foot off the gas, and Oklahoma nearly comes back and wins. But then Dicker, the kicker, comes in clutch and hits the game winner, and sends the Sooners home with the L. So that was a great game, man. That was just classic. Yeah, that was the year we played them twice, and unfortunately they got revenge. They got bailed out by a rematch, but that was just a great game all around. I don't know if you were at that game or not. I don't know if it's on your list, but that was just all around a beautiful college football game.
Yeah, I was at that game, and it kind of made my honorable mentions didn't quite crack the top 5. And the reasoning for that is that is the fact that Tom did his signature turtle move that we that we didn't know at the time was a thing. But it quickly at that point, I think it kind of became a thing, because I mean, we were up by like 21 points in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and somehow blew that lead in like 8 minutes or something. It was ridiculous. I remember being in the stands, and like end of the third quarter, we were feeling so good. I mean, we're blowing out OU. It's not even close. They can't stop our offense. We're just driving down the field. We're getting turnovers on Kyler Murray. It was such an amazing electric feeling. And then just to see them score and score and score, and us to just go 3 and out. And 3 out. I remember I think it was Trey Sermon that tied, gave the game tying touchdown. And I didn't actually throw up, obviously, but I wanted to throw up because I'm like, we just blew this game. So that's the reason it didn't make the list. I mean, we won the game, and obviously I was happy and I was excited when Dicker the kicker made it, but like at the same time in the back of my head, I'm like, good God, this could have been a blowout. This could have been the best game ever. And instead it turns into a nail biter that I want to vomit, because we almost blew this game where we were doing so well. And like I said, that became, kind of a signature for Tom Herman, unfortunately. And we didn't really realize it at the time, but that's why I didn't make the list is I felt kind of disappointed at the end, but at the same time, obviously felt great that we beat OU, and that it felt like a changing of the tide as well. So yeah, but for me, my number, what are we on? 3. We're on 3. I got Texas USC 2018. You mentioned it earlier. That one, I think holds the record as the highest attended game in at DKR. Technically LSU if you like look at the behind the scenes, had a much bigger capacity, but that's because a lot of fans got in that weren't accounted for and stuff, and there were people in hallways and stuff. But on technical terms, USC was a big game. Just one of those full atmospheres, and it felt really good to win it. I know going into the game, we were kind of like, can we win this? Can we not? We might get blown out, but we also might win this. The beginning of the season was definitely shaky with a loss in Maryland and then barely beating Tulsa. But to see us like answer the call and come back, because USC was up at the beginning of the game, but come back and then dominate them in the second half, felt amazing to like be like, okay, like we got it back. Yeah, the season's swinging in the right direction. Caden Stern's kick block, yes, that definitely stands out in my head as well. I remember just losing my mind and being the whole stadium going ballistic at that moment. But there were a lot of other big plays. I remember BJ Foster just murdering this particular receiver whose name blanks my mind, and other big plays as well. Little Jordan Humphrey had a few big catches and whatnot. So just a great game, big atmosphere. I think just anytime Texas and USC meet up is typically resulting in a, pretty heightened atmosphere just on its own. So that and the atmosphere coupled with that changing of the tide type feel, I think is what made it a top 3 game for me.
Yeah, man, it feels like Texas and USC should be playing every year, right? It'd be a good natural rivalry, home and home, to get going. But yeah, for me at number 2, I have Texas versus Missouri in 2008. 2008 was like the best year ever. That I like, really, because 2005 I was like half there, half not, half conscious, half, because I went to some of the games in 05. I remember the Natty, but like I was young, I couldn't really appreciate what was happening. But 2008, I was like at that point a diehard college football fan, diehard Texas fan, and we were really freaking good that year. I mean, the week before we had beaten OU, who was number 1 at the time, and then we were ranked 5 during that game. Then we jumped to number 1 and hosted Missouri, who was like ranked 10 with Chase Daniel and Jeremy Maclin, and I think it was on ABC primetime with Brent Musburger, and I was there, and it was a super electric atmosphere, and we just like blew them out so bad. I think we were up like 35-0 in the second quarter, and they put on some points late to make it somewhat respectable. But I remember we opened the game with like a big Roy Miller like 15-yard tackle for loss on an end around. They were trying to do like some sweep, and we just snuff it right out. And then Colt McCoy had some amazing plays that game. I think he had a beautiful touchdown pass to Malcolm Williams, and he had like a Heisman moment type thing where he fumbled the ball, picked it up, ran outside the pocket, and threw it like a dime to, I think it was Quan Cosby. So yeah, that game was just super electric. It was so loud, and that was one of the few times I've been to like a Texas game when we were ranked 1, like number 1 in the nation. And that was just that whole stretch, that whole gauntlet from OU, Missouri, was it Oklahoma State and Texas Tech in 2008 was like a legendary time, until Texas Tech obviously pulled off the upset to ultimately keep us out of winning another national championship. But yeah, I'll put 2008 Missouri up there. That game was awesome, and definitely my favorite game in DKR.
Nice. For me at number 2, this is interesting. My top 2 are both Charlie Strong years, being that I was a student. But when you look at the games themselves, independent from the seasons, obviously, these 2 games definitely stand out to me. At number 5, I got Texas OU 2015. Let's be real. Texas, that team was very, very bad. Going into that game, we were 1-4. We only beat, I believe was it Rice? Anyway, well, like we were 1-4 going into the game. We just got our asses handed to us by TCU. That game was, oh God, that was like the biggest drumming I think I've ever seen a Texas team take, was that TCU game the week before. And Oklahoma was, I believe, in the top 10. Baker Mayfield was just kind of starting to, make some noise at the time as a really good player. They had a great offense that year, like they always do. But I mean, that year they're definitely very formidable and good. And going into the game, it was just kind of like, I'm going to the game. I'm here because, this has become a tradition at this point with my father and I. I love the atmosphere, but I expect to get hammered by Oklahoma. And somehow, some way, that team was able to get an early lead on Oklahoma and hold on to it the entire game. That OU never took a lead. We managed to win the game. I mean, it was like kind of a close game. I think we only won by a touchdown, but we hung on the entire time. And I don't know if you were at that game, Myers. I'm curious if you were, so comment afterward. But like, to me, that was maybe one of like the wildest like Texas sides that I've seen in the Red River game, just because I think people were in such disbelief. I mean, this team was so down. Our fans were so down in the dumps, and to see us just come out and somehow pull off the upset of all upsets was just electric. Tyrone Swoops was doing his 18-wheeler package and doing great at it. Gerard Hurd was the starter at the time, and he wasn't really doing any passes, but he just kind of kept doing these runs and somehow getting first downs in like very key moments. And then our defense did pretty well as well and really gave Baker Mayfield a hard time. I think he got sacked quite a few times. So it was just, it was kind of like one of those things that you would have never believed it going into the game, but afterward it was just so electric. And then Charlie Strong crowd surfed on his team. I mean, that's how low they were. I even remember going into the game, there were like rumors that Charlie Strong was somehow going to like dip out of his contract and leave for Miami and stuff. Like, it was pretty toxic. And like Chris Boyd like tweeted during the TCU game, like, everything's coming back to me now, but we were so down, and the fact that we somehow pulled off this miracle upset, I think definitely warrants a top 2 pick for games I've attended.
Yeah, that game was mind blowing. I wasn't at that game, unfortunately, because I had a high school football game that day during the game, but I was checking the score on the sideline, and I was like, "What the heck? We're winning!" I was so shocked. I remember that Deontay Foreman big run he had that game.
Too.
That was iconic. But yeah, man, that was a great game. I remember, so surprising. But that's what the Red River Showdown's all about. You never know what's going to happen. Hopefully this year we beat OU again. So yeah. All right. For me, at number 1, I have Texas versus Oklahoma in 2008. This game I have romanticized because, like I said, 2008 was the year when it all came together in terms of me as a college football fan, and that was my first Red River Showdown I ever went to. Oklahoma was ranked 1 with Sam Bradford. We were ranked 5 with Colt, and it started off and OU went down and scored and took the lead. They went up 14-3 on us, I think, and I was like, "Oh God, we're gonna lose." Because OU was really good that year with Bob Stoops. And I think they had Brent Venables as their defensive coordinator at the time. They were just loaded all around. But then Jordan Shipley returns a kick return for a touchdown to cut into the lead and make it like an actual game. And the Cotton Bowl and the Upper Deck, if you know about the Upper Deck and the Cotton Bowl, that thing is really scary to be on when like a big play happens, because everything is like, it's an earthquake up there. The whole thing shakes like crazy. Like, I think it's designed to shake like on purpose. And I was young and like stressed out and hot. So like at that point when it shook like that, I was terrified. So I went down and watched like from under by the concessions and watched the rest of the game. And man, it was just amazing watching. I remember Chris Obanaya kind of sealed the deal with a long run, and then College Game Day was there. I was like right there behind Chris Fowler and Herb Street and all them. So man, that game was just amazing. And it's a shame that team in 2008 didn't win a national championship, because that team was so good with the Rack, Poe, Colt. It was just so loaded everywhere. Earl Thomas. So that team, I still say that 2008 team was better than the 2005 team in my memory, which is kind of a hot take, but it's a shame that the playoff didn't exist back then, because we definitely would have won the national championship, I think, if we would have gotten Florida. So yeah, I'll put Texas OU 2008 at number 1 for me.
Nice. Yeah, that definitely is a game that you see on Longhorn Network, and the highlights seem. I don't think I've ever watched a game fully back to front, like without any interruption, but maybe I should sometime because the highlights alone are very exciting in that game, and it's very back and forth. Two great teams. For me, to my number one game, this was the first game of my junior year of college. And this game had a lot of hype going into it. Texas versus Notre Dame 2016. This game, in a vacuum, I think this is one of the best, not even best Longhorn games, but one of the best football games I've ever been to in terms of theatrics. Going into the game, there was so much hype around Shane Buechele. We just had two horrible seasons under Charlie Strong, and it finally sounded like we got a new offensive coordinator in Sterling Gilbert. Our defense finally might have it under control with Strong. Everything seemed to be headed in the right direction, and there was a lot of hype, especially behind the whole team in general, but especially with Shane Buechele. There were so many whispers because we hadn't, at that point, it had been so long since we've had a competent quarterback, not even good, but competent. So the fact that this true freshman might be the guy that saves the day gave us so much excitement. Plus Notre Dame, that's a blue blood. That's just naturally you're going to have a lot of excitement at that point. And also like baby Bevo, it was the current Bevo's first game. So there was excitement about that too, seeing what he looked like and everything. And yeah, I just remember going to the game, and you got to remember, like, I was there for basically my first 3 years in college were Strong years. And if you remember like those games and you look at DKR was dead compared to what it is now. Like the stadiums, like the student section was pathetic. It wasn't pathetic, but compared to what it is now, it was pathetic. And the general seating as well. Like the top bowl would always just be kind of like peppered in with people. But that game was like sold out. It broke the attendance record for the time until the USC a couple seasons later. But broke the attendance record. It was like, oh my God, like this is college football, like you got a full stadium. It's loud, it's packed, beautiful weather. And it was just kind of mind blowing, just the atmosphere. And then to see our offense that looked so bad for the first 2 seasons under Strong suddenly just click in that game was so exciting. It's like, oh my God, we got an offense and we got a quarterback that can pass the ball. And kind of that split between Shane Buechele and Tyrone Swoops was exciting because you got Buechele that was, throwing that power spread offense. And then you had Tyrone Swoops that would occasionally come in and just run 18-wheeler the entire time. And it was the first time that they were really kind of showing that off. And we were dominant. But Notre Dame also played a great game that year. That game. And there were so much back and forth, big plays, turnovers. The game got super close at the end. There was a point where there was like a blocked field goal that was returned for a safety by Notre Dame that like tied the game up or something. It went into double overtime. And that second overtime, we somehow were able to hold Notre Dame to a field goal. And at that point, it was, all pressure was on. And it's like, what do we do here? And eventually we put it in Tyrone Swoop's hands, like once we're getting by the goal line, and everyone's like, come on, like get in that touchdown, get in that end zone. And sure enough, he was able to dance around. I believe it was on second down when we were at second and goal and score. And I remember the stadium just erupting and like fireworks went off. And if DKR wasn't like structured the way that it was, I guarantee you, like there would have been storming the field. Like it's a shame that DKR doesn't really allow for field storming, because to me that's very college football-esque. But we would have had it been constructed. It was Charlie Strong crowd surfed again. The players were just going berserk. I think they all tackled Tyrone Swoops and dogpiled him and stuff. And and this shows you how low we were. I remember like after the game being like, oh my God, we might be ranked. Because at that point, I had never seen a ranked Texas team as a student. That's how low we were. It's like we might have a number next to our name against UTEP. Because Notre Dame was ranked 9, we were unranked. So that game it has so much excitement before it, and then during the game. In terms of theatrics, I'd say it's probably one of the most entertaining games, just in a vacuum. Of course, nothing really came to fruition in that season. We went 5-7. Deontay Foreman had an incredible year, so that was fun, but the team kind of fell apart, let's be real. And then Charlie Strong lost his job. But that game independently, I think I struggle to see a game that'll ever really top it, unless it was like us winning a title, Big 12 or like some actual game worth merit. But in terms of regular season games, that's probably as high up as I can get in terms of everything just kind of coming together.
Yeah, man, that game was electric. It would have been higher, but like that season was just so horrible. It ended up meaning nothing in the end. But at the time, it was absolutely insane and electric and awesome. So
were you there?
Yeah, I was there, but I wasn't in the upper decks.
Gotcha.
But yeah. All right. So
section was different that game. That student section felt like the Tom Herman student sections, because we're like, as I said, before that point, we were there was no juice to DKR. And then for that one game there was, and then it kind of faded away again. And then Tom Herman was able to revitalize that to a more regular level. So
yeah, and hopefully the student section gets even better this year. But before we hop off, I want to just quickly list off the 5 worst games I've ever attended as a Longhorns fan. At number 5, Texas versus Kansas State in 2007. This is kind of when we were still like really good, and like losing was very rare for us back then. And Jordy Nelson and Josh Freeman came into DKR and just absolutely put it on us. They just kept scoring and returning punts. And there was a big rain delay in the middle of the game, which I remember like my mom got like her entire purse ruined by water. So that was just a bad game. And it stands out to me as one of my least favorite experiences at a Texas game. At number 4, Texas at Baylor in 2013. If you're watching this and you were there, you understand how cold that game was. It was so cold. It was wet. It was probably like at least 20 degrees. But that game was the de facto Big 12 title, and we could not like do anything because we had Case McCoy throwing like in like frozen, like freezing weather, which is just a terrible combination. And Baylor was good that year with Art Briles, obviously. So it was just, and it wasn't like we were getting blown out. It was like, we can't do anything, but we're still like in this, like we can still win this. So it was just like a slow, miserable, cold death, which ultimately cemented Mac's career at Texas. But that was a very, miserable game. So I have that at number 4. At number 3, Texas, Maryland, 2017, the first Maryland game. It was the first game of the Tom Herman era. It was so hot, so early. So hot. It was just like this. DKR was half empty to begin with because it was so early, I guess. And
it was like an 11 a.m. kickoff. I remember having to set an alarm and being like, God, it's so early for a game.
I know. And there was like no atmosphere at all. And then Maryland comes in and just beats us. Like they went up early on us. Like we had to claw back to make it a game, and then we got close, and then they just pulled away again. It was just a horrible way to start the Tom Herman tenure, because no one even thought we were going to lose to Maryland. Like that wasn't even a possibility. We're like, are we going to blow them out, or is it going to be close? Because Maryland was very average the year before, but they just came in there and looked like gods against us, and it was just really depressing and really miserable game. Number 2, I have Texas against OU in 2012. I think that's when we lost like 66-21. It was one of the two. I went to one of them, and I went to the one that I think it was the bigger blowout. That's the one I was at, and it was horrible. Really embarrassing. It was just sad. Our side of the Cotton Bowl was empty in the second quarter. So I'm glad we don't do that anymore, where we get blown out by OU. At least we Herman and Charlie made him competitive now. But yeah, that just whenever you lose to OU and lose to OU like in that fashion, and they're just taunting you the entire way out in the state fair, the horns down. That was tough. So OU Texas 2012 at 2. At number 1, I have Texas at BYU in 2013. So I traveled.
Oh, you traveled there.
Yeah, this one was in Provo. So my dad and I went thinking, okay, we're gonna probably win this game. It's BYU, they're nothing special. But then little did we know this guy named Taysom Hill was their quarterback. And this guy named Manny Diaz was our defensive coordinator. And it was just a nightmare combination. We could not tackle anybody. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Us trying to tackle Taysom Hill, literally any of their players. Remember, they had Cody Hoffman at the time. They were not very good, but we made them look like gods. They didn't blow us out, but they took control of that game like in the second quarter and just kind of we couldn't get back in it. And it was sad, man. There was a big rain delay. The game started off all late after a thunderstorm. We couldn't really move the ball. David Ash got hurt, had a concussion, and we had like Jalen Overstreet in there trying to run the Wildcat. It was just horrible. I mean, it was a hopeless feeling. And then we were like, let's just get back to the hotel. And then we're still like, I don't know, thousands of miles away from our homes in Texas. So like, now I got to travel early in the morning. It was a big regret going to that game. It was big regrets. But yeah, I'll put that as my least favorite game I've ever been to.
Yeah, I didn't do a top 5 least one, but I was mentioning to you earlier when you said BYU, I was thinking the one at DKR, which to me is my worst game that I've ever been to. That was my second game as a student at Texas, and again, like it was like BYU beat us pretty bad last year, but like there's no way they're gonna do it again, and they did it again. And of course, David Ash was injured again. So we had Tyrone Swoops out there playing his first game as a starter, I believe. And our offense was so incompetent. It wasn't even that our defense was horrible, which our defense was very bad that game too. And Taysom Hill torched us in that game. Maybe not quite as much as the first time around, but there were a lot of like almost Heisman moments. It seemed like if Taysom Hill was able to do that consistently and not get injured. But I just remember our offense being so putrid. Like I remember like, oh, we got a first down. This is a big deal that we even got a first down. It was so bad. And I remember, I mean, I was in the student section and like our entire like particular section grouping, because me and my friends were like, we're freshmen. We want to make a statement here. We're going to stay the entire game, regardless of how bad this gets. We're going to stay all the way eyes to eyes. That was a saying back in the day. And I remember our entire section being empty, and it was literally just us. We just sat alone as BYU continued to pour on points, and we're just like, I guess this is what being a Texas fan means in 2014. So. Yeah, to me, that's my least favorite. Funny that both of them were BYU games. Those were just head scratchers.
Yeah, man. I never want to see BYU ever again on the football field with Texas. It's just there was too many bad memories.
Yeah. Them in Maryland. Maryland was also bad.
Yeah, them too.
All right. Well, that wraps up the video. We'd love to see y'all comment below about your top 5 best or worst games that you've ever attended as fans. I'm sure there's a few out there that went to that Rose Bowl game, or probably a lot of other really great games out there. So we'd love to see that participation below in the comments if you care to share. Otherwise, we will see you in the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed this kind of a fun topic, and expect more consistent content. We took a bit of a break for a while, but season's getting closer, so we're going to start providing you more content on the regular at that point. Myers, you got anything else?
Nah, man. Just keep an eye out. We got the good stuff coming because college football is coming, so it's all going to get more fun soon. So keep watching and subscribe.
Sounds good. All right, see you guys.